About 9-10 years ago I found this Greek movie called Dogtooth, and I don't know exactly how I found it or why I decided to watch it, but I did, and I loved it. It was great. A weird little movie with this really strange tone. So I decided to keep an eye on this guy who made it, Yorgos Lanthimos. Well, a few years later he made a movie called The Lobster, and again, I loved it. Then a few years after that, he made a movie called The Killing of a Sacred Deer, and I didn't love it. I loved parts of it, but as a whole I just didn't get it. But then he came out with this movie, and it looked fantastic. Everyone seemed to love it too, so I got pretty excited. And I will admit that my expectations for this were probably unreasonably high. However, I thought it was fine, good, but not great. But I didn't feel let down either. Probably because I knew better than to get my hopes up too much. But also because technically there's nothing wrong with it. I can't point to a lot of flaws. It's absolutely a well-made movie. And I can see why people like it. And I liked it, to a certain degree. But it never really clicked with me. It didn't pull me in and engage me. And I guess that's because you kinda know exactly where it's going, very early on. There aren't any major surprises or anything. It's about this young woman, Emma Stone, who arrives at the Queen's court, back in the early 18th century. And the Queen is, how do I put this, sickly and a bit eccentric, almost childlike. But she's got this woman by her side, played by Rachel Weisz, who's sort of whispering in her ear. But now this younger woman shows up and things get a bit more complicated. Now, turns out this is actually sort of a tragic love story, and that I didn't expect. But aside from that, it's just very, well, linear and easy to figure out. I didn't feel like I was watching a movie by the same person who made Dogtooth. And compared to his previous movies, this one's very digestible. Very straightforward and kinda conventional, to be honest. There's nothing all that weird or unexpected going on. Sure, there are some absurdist elements to the characters, but the narrative is fairly simple, nothing confusing or challenging. And one of the things I appreciate about Lanthimos is that he makes these great movies that feel very unique, like no one else could have made them. Even Sacred Deer, I didn't really get it, but it was definitely unique and strange. But this one felt a little bit too safe, and it didn't feel like it was doing anything new. And I think there's enough people out there doing safe and traditional movies, that it's a bit of a shame that a creative guy like him decides to make something this normal. But again, that's not to say that this is a bad movie by any means. The cinematography is great, the sets and the costumes are fantastic. The acting is great too, especially Olivia Colman as the Queen. She was outstanding. The score is also very good, and the script is sharp and funny. I don't have a lot of bad things to say about it, but as a whole it just failed to impress me. Mostly because of the unsurprising narrative, and it didn't really get me emotionally involved either, until the very end. Then it sort of focused in on that part of the story more, and got me actually invested, but it didn't for like 95% of the runtime. I was more just following along, watching the story unfold from a distance. And well, I don't know, I liked it. It was fine, but I'm not sure I feel any need to rewatch it. I don't think there's any more depth or complexity to uncover here, which is kind of an interesting contrast to something like Sacred Deer. I didn't like it that much, but I'm kinda curious to rewatch it, because there's so much stuff to unpack in that one. There's a lot of depth and nuance in it, but this one just seemed to be more of a what you see is what you get kinda deal, which again is fine. Nothing wrong with it, but I kinda expect and want more from Lanthimos. But would I recommend it? Sure, why not? Especially if you like dark comedy. So check it out, I guess, or don't. I'm not your queen, but I am trying to sell out, so consider liking, subbing, hitting that bell and supporting me on Patreon, because I really need that fancy 18th century palace. And hey, why not drop a comment below and check out another review? I'd appreciate it. Thanks.